Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hacker Factory podcast. I'm your host, the hacker maker, Phillip Wylie. In each episode, I have someone with a unique journey into cybersecurity that they will share with us, as well as sharing knowledge on how to get started in the industry. And today I'm very excited to have with me Matt Keeley. So Matt works for Bishop Fox and he's a pen tester and he says he's got some good stories for us. So we're looking forward to the good stories. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I know before we started, you told me how busy things are. So definitely appreciate it. And I do like, before we get started into this, to share with our listeners, like a lot of people they have as guests, Matt's big on helping people. So I think what he has to say and share today is going to be very helpful.
Sweet. So I'll go ahead and get started. I guess I'll tell you a little bit about what I do currently and then sort of jump back to how I got here. So right now I'm a senior security consultant engineer at Bishop Fox. Primarily what Bishop Fox does is offensive security consulting for the Fortune companies. So that could be Amazon, Apple, Facebook, pretty much a lot of your big names. Do a lot of like web app pen testing, mobile pen testing, reverse engineering, product security, stuff like that. Specifically, what I do every day is a good mix of product security and web applications. So I handle a lot of physical products, from IoT devices to tractors, cars, that sort of stuff. But always with those devices, you tend to see a lot of web applications, mobile applications. Things just tend to mix in that sort of realm. So the fun part about a consulting company is it's never the same thing. It's never the same client. So the projects change pretty much on a 2 to 3 week basis, sometimes longer, depending on what you're working on. But it's a really good mix of data, a good mix of experience in project types. But so I'll sort of get started on like how I got to this point. So maybe 6 years ago, I guess I first started my InfoSec career when I was in college, a little bit in high school, but I really didn't know what I was doing, right? Like they had VulnHub. I'd done the Mr. Robot VulnHub and like, that's what I was into. However, the resources just weren't all there, especially back when I was first starting, right? Like Hack the Box was really difficult, especially now they have like all the training paths and the labs and like it's very beginner tailored, beginner friendly. Back in the day, it didn't happen to be the case. They had a couple of easy boxes, but the majority of them were very difficult for somebody to get in. So, sort of flash forward, I tried that in high school. It sort of worked, but, I was still a kid trying to figure out what I wanted to do and that sort of space. And then I got into college, and when I was the end of my freshman year in college, and I went to Arizona State University for college, I started a club, a school club, kind of a club. We didn't really know what it was yet, right? We found 5 people that were interested in hacking or pen testing, and not really on like the binary analysis side. So we weren't super interested in like all the CTFs and that sort of stuff. We were more interested in like the big picture stuff. So like, high scale web applications, products that have, 15, 20 different components. Sometimes it does have like the binary analysis aspect to it, but it wasn't just that. So we tried to start a club and there was 5 of us, and it was just for pen testing. It was going to be a pen testing club. We got approval from, one of the professors. It was going to be a mix of red team, blue team, and we'd split it up during the weeks. And it just didn't work out how we thought it would be. we sort of sold it off as like, hey, do you guys want to learn hacking? Like, do you want to learn this? And so we would constantly go out and try to find a bunch of students to get involved with this club. And we really oversold what we were teaching them. And so, the first meeting comes around, the room is packed. We're expecting like maybe 5-10 people in this room. And there's like 70 people the first day for the brand new club. And we were just shocked. We didn't really know what we were doing. And so we essentially started out with like, hey, maybe we'll try to do like the very entry level hackabox. Maybe we'll try this. Like, we'll just sort of see how the day plays out. So, we did like a club introduction, started talking back and forth and did that. And what we found very quickly is that with like this really broad range of students, we had English majors, art majors, mathematicians, some engineers, some computer science. We had such a wide range of students that we had a really hard time actually tailoring content that would fit what they wanted. So if we were trying to teach how to do like web application pen testing, for example, they didn't even really know how to use Linux in some instances, or some people were like expert beyond what we could do. Software developers, they've been writing web applications for years, and like that's just sort of the nature of how we started out. So after that meeting, we tailored the content for this club specifically to match like what we thought we would want if we were more of like an engineering student, or just beginning out, fresh as can be, doing like bandit over the wire. And that's really where like I started getting into the whole hacking scene, or the pen testing scene. And then from there, like it's grown and grown and grown. We started with 5 people and now they have a little over 1,100 people now. They still do meetings every single week, and we've opened the club up actually to pretty much anybody. They have a Discord. They do all the talks in the Discord and that sort of stuff.
Very cool. I'm sure it's going to be satisfying to see that the club has carried on and grown like that over the years. That's really good.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's been a lot of work. A lot of just testing the waters, seeing if things work, trying to see if if we can get more I want to say user retention with like cooler things on the website, or writing CVE posts, or writing blog posts and that sort of stuff. So it's definitely been a good experiment of ours. I don't know if anybody really thought that we would grow this club into something this size, but it's been awesome.
Yeah, you just never can tell how that's going to turn out. So how did that experience help you in your current role? Because I'm sure that there's junior pen testers that you work with or help bring up to speed when bringing them on board.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first tried, like the first job that I went for actually a blue team job because I wasn't really sure where I was going, and I failed at that miserably. Didn't get the job. They told me that like you're going the wrong direction. Like you're a red teamer. You want to do the attack side, not the defense. So when we started getting this club up and running, the one thing that I tried to do as best I could is get basically going out and getting guest speakers, right? So we had Honeywell come out, we had Bishop Fox come out, we had Lockheed Martin came out, and we had one other one, but I can't remember the name of the company. But anyways, we had a bunch of people come out for these guest talks, and like that was originally where I actually met Bishop Fox. So we had Gavin Stroy and Mike Ostrowski that both came out for the first talk that we did. And I met the recruiters, like I met them, and we all just clicked, right? And since then, Bishop Fox has sponsored talks. So they give different talks on tools like eyeballers, writing custom things like, developing your pen testing career, that sort of stuff. But they do that every semester. We also have like a direct recruiting pipeline with them, which is really cool. So people that are in the club basically get first pick on sort of where they're going, right? So we have a pipeline with Bishop Fox and Carvana. And ultimately what this does is it gets students from the university almost like a direct line for recruiting for these hard to get positions. I say hard to get because it's not always so easy when you're trying to get to like InfoSec recruiters. Sometimes there's a few hurdles that you have to jump through, but with the club specifically, it's pretty nice having that direct communication line.
Yeah, that's good, because back when I was teaching college, and I still mentor people, but one of the things, I always try to encourage the students and mentees to do is to network, because, it's a lot easier to get a job. If you're going to college, if you get an internship, that gives you a little more of an edge trying to get into security, but sometimes it can still be difficult. So having that connection, I'm sure, makes it good. And it's a good selling point for the school too, to be able to help get students hired.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to sort of build on the networking part too, we also had students, a couple buddies of mine that weren't actually associated with the university or anything like that. But having that network of all the people that are working at all these InfoSec companies really did open a lot of doors for them. Especially like trying to get InfoSec jobs was pretty easy for them just because they knew the right people, which a lot of times goes better than knowing the right stuff.
Yeah, just having those connections, because it doesn't matter how good you are if people don't know who you are, just trying to make that connection. And, recruiters have all these resumes they got to go through, and it's probably harder for people that are new to the industry because someone's just going to look at them, quickly glance and see how much experience. And if they don't have any, or maybe they just got hacked the box and that sort of thing, they just pass on and not realize that they could be of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of the hard part, especially when I'm trying to recruit any interns, is you don't always get the full picture when reviewing a resume. Some of the best hackers that we've ever hired are art majors, are music majors, or English majors, especially from that university pipeline. So you never really get the full picture until you meet these people, which is just, it always works out for the best for us, at least.
Yeah, that's while we're kind of mentioning that, are there some tips or tricks that you'd recommend to someone? Because I know a lot of times people aren't putting things on there that they're doing the study, and that's totally missed, and that's kind of a big deal to people that are hiring like yourself. So what are some tips there?
Yeah, the key thing that I'm looking for at least our intern programs that come in is some initiative that you're really into the pen testing space, right? So if we're hiring for like a pen testing intern, what the things I'd be looking for are maybe certifications. And I'm not talking like OSCP or really high level certification. There's a lot of really smaller level ones. Security Plus, VHL is a really good one. It's like a pen testing lab environment, super easy to do. Does it off certificate of completion and only costs $100. So certifications are always that one good thing. But yeah, having your hack the box on there, having any relevant courses, any books that you really understand. So if you've gone through like the Web Hacker's Handbook, for example, and you really know the content of that, like feel free to throw that on the resume. I will totally ask you a ton of questions about the book. I even have one buddy that helped write it. But like, that's sort of the stuff that I'm looking for, at least some initiative that you're really into the position. Oftentimes, like what really sets it for me is like having a cover letter as well. A good cover letter can really open a lot more doors. People tend to read those, especially if you're one of the people that puts them out there.
Yeah, that's a great tip. A lot of times people overlook that, or they don't want to do the cover letter, but a lot of times you're trying to reduce the number of pages of a resume. That's a place to share some information without adding too much to your resume.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, you can really talk about, what you're doing, what you're trying to do going forward, and sort of how the goals of the company aligns to your goals in the cover letter as well.
And as far as that goes, cover letter, what do you think about people following up? If you apply for a job, what do you like to see? Does that ever matter to you that the applicant follows up later on to check on the status of the job, or just a follow-up thanking you for the interview? Is that stuff still of value?
I think so. Really the advice I give, and I'll sort of tie it back to like the thank you emails. The way that the interview process works from the interviewer point of view will sort of describe why it's a saying. So a lot of people will know that it's a saying that, oh yeah, send them a thank you email, but a lot of people don't know why. The reason why is when you're doing an interview, whether it's with an intern or a senior consultant, typically you have a dashboard of questions. You sort of have to ask the questions. They don't have to be specifically off the list, but you sort of write down your notes about the candidate and submit that information back to HR. Well, if you don't submit it immediately, which most people don't, it actually gives you a notification within 24 hours to say, hey, submit this, submit your scorecard for this person. So the reason they have that, send a thank you note 24 hours afterwards is because when that person is writing it up, or if they left it in their queue or whatnot, it gives them that initiative to go, oh, hey, this guy's really interested in the job. Like, maybe I was a little bit in the middle of like a maybe, seems like he's really interested in it. Now I'll push him towards a yes type deal. So that's why they recommend doing that. It's pretty interesting that I never knew until I started doing more interviews. But yeah, definitely reach out to them, reach out to your recruiter. The recruiters do put in a lot of work, especially when hiring, even interns. Like, a lot of work goes into the process. So saying thank you a lot of times for your time, for interviewing, that goes a long way as well.
I figure there's probably going to be times where that could be a deciding factor. You've got two candidates, you're having a hard time to decide. And then when someone follows up with a thank you email and seems a little more professional, that, I would say would probably help lean towards who you'd pick if you're having a hard time deciding.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you tie in things that you talked about as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be the questions that they asked in the interview, but if you tie it back to, anything that you're talking about during the interview, it always goes a long way as well. Shows you're paying attention.
So what are some of the soft skills, since we're kind of talking about that, just kind of interview etiquette, and there's some other things that people overlook a lot of times, like writing skills and communication skills. How valuable do you think that is to applicants?
It's almost more important than the actual pen testing skills, in my opinion. With consulting specifically, like with a company like Bishop Fox, we're always going to be in front of the client. So being able to communicate and articulate your thoughts efficiently with them is going to be like one of the key things, or at least like the key driving factors in an interview process as well. So that's definitely one of the big things that we look for, is how well you can communicate with other people, how well you can communicate with your team, because oftentimes you'll be working on projects with team members as well. And if you have somebody that's just not communicating, he's shooting off a message once a day, maybe twice a day, and just not there, that's always going to be a problem later down the road. But yeah, understanding how to write a professional email is something that's super good as well. It takes a little bit of practice to be able to do that. But ultimately, like, writing a very professional, articulate email is oftentimes a really good skill to have.
Yeah, those are good points there too. And the better you can describe and explain stuff in your pen test report, the easier it's going to be for you. Because when you do the debrief or readout, and if they don't understand it, you're going to have a lot more questions if they don't understand. So
yeah, absolutely. And they're going to ask questions that you may not always know the answer to as well. So knowing how to communicate when you don't know the answer to something is very important. It does happen. Nobody knows everything. Nobody, sometimes when you're doing a report, things change. It may have worked one way when you were acting with the machine, but now it's changed. Understanding why it works like that, you may not always know, but being able to communicate with the client or the customer and telling them like, hey, we'll remediate the problem. We'll work with you to get this fixed. Like, we're here, we're available. Set up a time, we'll talk, and we'll walk you through it, is always a huge winner just in the business world in general.
Yeah, that's great advice, because it could be difficult when you're giving someone a report and they feel like you're beating up on them. And sometimes it seems like the better you communicate and just try to build that rapport, the better it is for you as the pen tester.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of another thing, right? Security problems do happen, and they happen in every organization, and it's not always the person's fault. Sure, they may have accidentally mismanaged memory and now you have a buffer overflow, but understanding and being able to articulate that to a client, like, hey, we don't need to put blame on this person specifically. Like, we need to get better as an organization, and that's sort of what we're here to do. We want to put the roadblocks in place so that this doesn't happen again. It may not just happen with that specific person, but if we can put the roadblocks in place with the entire organization, that's going to be the best path to go down.
Very cool. Good information there. So one of the things I typically ask my guests is what advice would you give someone that's wanting to get into the industry? How would you did your path, you went through college, but you've been experienced professional and helping people along the way, what would you recommend to someone that wanted to be an offensive security professional?
I'd say getting started is usually the hardest part with that. You got to know your stuff, right? If you're going to go into the industry, a lot of times, especially even with the college route, people go through college, get their degree, and don't know anything about the thing they got their degree in. So if you want to be a pen tester, you need to know how to pen test. And nowadays, there's so many resources out there for it. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, VulnHub, thousands of blog posts, articles, things like that. So really diving deep, knowing your stuff, you can start a blog. Like the way that the way that people learn is always going to be different. Some people are very good hands-on. Some people can read books and understand it better than the hands-on people. Like it just really depends on your learning style. But whatever that learning style is, get to the point, I'd say, before you really start looking for the job to where like you can show value to a company, or you can bring value to a company that you're going to work for or trying to go work for, because it's gonna go a long way, especially when you know web app pen testing. If you're trying to be a web app pen tester, you got to know the OWASP top 10. Like there's just no questions about it. They're gonna ask in your interview. If you don't know something simple like XSS or SSRF, like it's gonna end up hurting you in the long run.
Yeah, and it seems like on the interviews, that's the stuff you always get asked about. If any kind of vulnerability, it's usually something related to the OWASP top 10, even if you're not specifically interviewing for a web app pen testing job.
It always is. And having experience actually finding those vulnerabilities, whether it be in labs or on anything else, it's critical, because then you can actually talk about like, oh, we may have had this SSRF vulnerability, but we could chain it to this as we did it in this lab. Like this is the key indicators that we look for. And that it goes a long way, especially when you can talk more about the vulnerability, not just reading off the definition of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We interviewed someone at a company, one of my former companies, and one of the things that the team was impressed with, the person couldn't name the different types of cross-site scripting, but they could explain them, but didn't have the names right, which was good because that's the important part. It's easier to figure out which one is which, so.
Yeah, I've done that as well. When they ask me what DOM is, and I'm like, I can't remember what it stands for. I just don't use it enough, but this is how it works. It does happen. And oftentimes, if you can explain how it works better than the core definition, it goes a lot longer, or it goes a lot better for the interview.
And speaking of the interview questions too, like you kind of mentioned, if someone doesn't answer correctly or know the answer, how's a good way to respond to that? If someone asks you a question in an interview about a certain subject or something, and you don't have much experience in it, or you really don't know it that well, what's a good way to respond to a question you don't know? I mean, I know some people could just say, I don't know, and that may be acceptable in some cases, but is there a better way of doing that?
In my opinion, you should always add value to the question, right? So you may not know what, if the question is, let's say, what is reflected cross-site scripting? If you don't know what reflected cross-site scripting is, it's not the end of the world. But if you do know what, let's say, stored XSS is, and you start talking about that instead, you can always start by saying, look, I don't exactly know what this is, or I don't know what this specific variation of this is, but I do know about this, and what I can tell you about this, and how this, how similar it is with the other thing. May not be all that similar, but if you do add value to the question, along with the I don't know, you don't want to lie. And that's the big thing, because the person giving the interview does know, or they should. Sometimes they don't, but they should at least know the answer to the questions that they're asking. And, if you try to lie to them or try to give them a bad answer, it gives a really bad intuition of what you're going to do in front of a client. So if a client asks you a question and you don't know, it's better to tell the client that you don't know, but you're more than happy to follow up with them. You're more than happy to figure it out. You just don't know at the current time, or you'll follow back up with an email rather than trying to, make up something else.
Yeah, that's not a good way to interview, or even when you're employed. If someone thinks you're lying. And one of the things I share with people too, when you're writing your resume up or your LinkedIn profile, make sure you're putting things you have experience with, or let people know that you have limited experience with that. Because if you go in and claim to be a Burp Suite expert. You're going to get asked a lot of questions about Burp Suite.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about your resume. Whatever you put on there, you have to know inside and out. So I had an interview one time where I put TCP on there, and the guy wanted to know the entire TCP stack. He wanted to know the ins and outs of everything there was to know about TCP. And I just didn't know it. Like I knew it at a high level, but I didn't know it at a low enough level to what he wanted. So yeah, anything on your resume is fair game. Oftentimes, if I ever have to give interviews, I typically will just read your resume and ask things about your experiences, what tools you have on there. That's typically how I like to do any sort of interviews that I'm getting.
Very good advice. Very interesting. So one of the things too, we kind of talked about some different resources. What do you think about Portswigger's Web Application Security Academy? How do you like that resource? Is that something you recommend? And what do you think about their cert?
I took their cert when they did the $10 deal. It was kind of difficult. It was a lot more difficult than I would expect, but that's sort of like the try harder, whole pen testing methodology type deal. Their labs are phenomenal. It's one of the best resources for any sort of web pen testing on the internet. They have a lot of blogs. They have a lot of research. It's a phenomenal tool, phenomenal resource to use. And, even the professionals are using Burp Suite as a resource. It's almost like the first thing you look up when you try to look up a vulnerability for web applications. Typically, they're one of the top 3 on like a Google search.
Yeah, I've played around with the Academy because I used to use it for the web app pen testing course I was teaching when it first started out. There wasn't as much content on there. But I would say from just what I hear about the certification, I would venture to say that it's probably better than some of the web app pen testing certifications that are available out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot more in depth. They also do a lot of chaining, which is really cool. So they'll chain vulnerabilities like XSS to CSRF. A lot of acronyms, sorry, but they do a lot of chainings. They go really in depth. They show you how to find it out in the wild, what it's going to look like. And one thing they do really well, especially in their teaching, is they show you different variations of it, which oftentimes if you do some trainings, like it's one variation and that's all you get. But with Portswigger specifically, they'll show you 4 or 5 different variations of the same vulnerability, which in my opinion gives you sort of the best overlook on how that vulnerability is going to exist in the wild.
Very cool. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we get this in before the show ends, but you said you had some good stories. So I'm sure a lot of people like myself like a good story. So if you got some stories you'd like to share, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the big story, I guess it's sort of my life story, was building up the club, a lot of the challenges that we've had with that. Some of the internship opportunities out there that I've done, I guess is where a lot of like the fun comes in. Never take anything too seriously. You just can't. So like a lot of times during some of the internships, I guess not a lot of times, but during a couple of the internships that I've had, one of the internships that I first started doing in security was pretty interesting. It was for a security company, but I wasn't really doing any sort of pen testing or anything like that. It's sort of a bigger company, but what they had me doing was building out a system that they used for like their bathroom monitors. Really weird, but they only had 2 bathrooms and people hated having to walk to the bathroom and the door being locked or whatever. So we used some Raspberry Pis and set up a web application internally that was supposed to be, secure. That was the security project that we did. And ultimately you can like set appointments and set times for the bathroom for the entire office at certain locations and things like that. But that was like one of my first like real job security experiences. And it was definitely bizarre building it and understanding why we needed it.
Well, you think where it's used is kind of funny, but it's really an interesting project. So did you have it set up like an Outlook, like a meeting room that you can reserve?
Yes, exactly. It would sync funny with the Raspberry Pis and let you know when the door was locked or unlocked.
Yeah, I have an appointment with the second floor restroom at 1 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting project. A lot of time went into it, and they're supposed to. I think they probably still use it today. With COVID, I don't know if they're all full back in the office, but back when it used to be a zoo and everybody was up and moving,
Yeah.
It got used a lot more than I thought it would.
Yeah, that would be helpful on airplanes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because so few restrooms and so many people. So.
Yep. Yeah. Especially if you could see it right on your seat too.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's annoying if they would have it, let you know where you don't have to get up and turn around and look to see if the lights illuminated red or green back there. It's
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, we're getting down towards the end of the show. Are there any more stories you'd like to share, or any advice that you'd like to give?
Maybe some advice. I mean, what worked for me, and this is sort of like the whole big thing about advice, right? What worked for me may not work for everybody else. Everybody sort of has their own paths. This is what worked for me. Going the university route, building the club, doing that. Started doing a lot more like public speaking, hack the box, all that sort of stuff. But it may not work for everybody. Sometimes, and there's some hackers out there that I work with that are 10 times, 15 times better than I am. All they do is read books, and they understand the technology completely just from the books. And they're some of the best hackers in the world. So, take my advice with more or less a grain of salt. There's a lot of opportunities out there. You just got to find the right one that works perfectly for you.
That's good advice. And one of the things too, if anyone's considering college, you don't have to have college or certifications to get into the field. But one of the things I will say is I think if you get a college degree, you won't ever regret it. But maybe if you don't get it and you wait till you're too old or whatever, and you don't want to go back to school, or you can't go back to school due to your schedule, you may have regrets there. So that's one of the things to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And to sort of build on that too, if you have anybody in the audience that's sort of contemplating going back and doing a master's degree, there's really no time like the present. It's only going to get harder as things go on. It never hurts to have the degree. Is it required? No, but does it help? Absolutely. Sometimes it can jumpstart your career or open a lot more doors that you may not have otherwise. Certifications are phenomenal though. There's a lot of certifications out there. Finding the right one, there's some that look really good on paper. There's some that teach you a lot more than they do look good on paper. But yeah, ultimately, I guess from what I've seen, you'll probably want one or the other when you're starting to apply or just even break into the industry, right? You don't have to have them, but if you don't have them, you have to have something else that gives you sort of the look, right? The InfoSec look, whether it be the number 1% and try hack me, or like continuously playing hack the box, or you've done Portswigger or things like that. You'll need something to fill up the resume and show that you have the skills that are required for that position. And so that's sort of what I would gear towards in that aspect as well.
Yeah, and even though you don't have to have degrees in the industry these days, but one of the things I would say too is, I think if you're someone that needs structure, then that may be the way to go than trying to do try hack me and hack the box and all this stuff on your own. Maybe you need that base. And once you learn that, maybe you're good to do self-study. But, I've known people that went to work for companies that were working remote, and they just needed to be managed a little closer. And I think sometimes with education, sometimes people need that as well too. If they've got deadlines, they got to get this done. It's not up to them if they don't do it,
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't always matter where you get the degree either.
Yes.
Like I said, I got mine at ASU, but I've met plenty of people from GCU or some of the other schools in the Valley here. And it doesn't really matter what you get the degree in. And sometimes it doesn't matter what you get it in either. When I first onboarded as an intern, actually, one of my buddies is a music major, graduated with a bachelor's in music, and he's been pen testing ever since.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing where people start out sometimes. I mean, that's kind of like my wife is in digital forensics now, but she went to school for occupational therapy, worked in the healthcare industry, and switched. You just don't know. And people all the time that say, "Am I too old?" Because I don't mean to laugh at people, but when I hear a 30-year-old say, "Am I too old?" That's at 20, you're still a kid. At 30, 10 years later, you're not old all of a sudden. But, to hear people say, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, am I too old? But I see people all the time that, get started at 50 years old in the industry even, it's never too late.
Absolutely. And there's the nice part about the InfoSec industry as well is everybody's always willing to help. It's one of the few industries where everybody seems to want to help everybody else. So that could be getting into, certain jobs. If you're really interested in specific companies, a lot of times, you can see the LinkedIn posts or the Twitter posts like, hey, does anybody work here? Can anybody give me a referral to this place? And you'll see thousands of likes and retweets and everything else. So they're like, yeah, here's the director. The director's giving them a phone call tomorrow. And it's quite crazy to see how close the industry is. It seems like everybody tends to know each other.
Yeah, I agree. That's some great advice. So we're down towards the end of the show. So I'd like to thank you once again for joining. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.